pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger and roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly!
Sliding down side FP off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Thomas Burghardt. I'm an editor and reporter for NASASpaceflight.com, and I'm joined by two of our good buddies. You've seen them on the show before. To my left, we've got Jack Beyer, photographer and video editor for NASA Spaceflight. Jack, how are you doing?
Doing great.
All right, I'm also joined by Chris Bergin, managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, back on the show. Chris, good to have you back. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you, and welcome to everyone who is tuned in for the show. We've got a lot of cool space news to talk about from the past week. We've got some Starship testing, which of course we have an update for you every single week. There's always something going on down in Boca Chica, Texas. We'll be talking about the SN7.1 test tank, which is approaching its test to destruction, as well as the SN8 high altitude hop test that we're all looking very much forward to. We also got some progress on the Sls green run testing, gimbal checks on the RS-25 engines. We'll talk a lot about that and dozens of other stories around the space world this week. As always, this is a live show. We want to interact with you guys. So if you guys have any questions or comments about what we're talking about, please put them in the chat. If you have a question, and tag us in chat with @NASASpaceflight, that will put them into our question queue, and we can bring them up and talk about them and try and answer any of your questions. So please feel free to throw any questions about what we're talking about or stuff that we're not talking about that's related to spaceflight. We'd be happy to answer all of them. But for the start off, I think we're going to dive into a quick overview of Starship testing. We've been covering that a lot this week. If you've been following the channel, we've had some live streams of some testing going on. Just the other night, we had some really late night testing. I think I got lucky. I wasn't on that stream that night because you guys were up till like 4 a.m. my time. Jack, were you there that night?
Yeah, that was a hoot.
Tell us what happened that night.
I mean, that's the tricky part. Is it's kind of hard to say with any certainty, in the absence of an Elon tweet or some other sort of confirmation. We're kind of just looking at the tea leaves and trying to figure out what's going on based on past experience and whatnot. So it sure looked like they tried to put liquid nitrogen into SN7.1. The road was all closed and everything. So they were full into testing. They might have even gotten some liquid nitrogen in there because we did see venting out of the top, but there was a significant amount of activity from the GSD area. You can see momentarily. I'm sure it gets really active. So I don't know. We don't know if that was nominal activity, just the pipes sort of chilling down, or if maybe like a pipe came unzipped or something came loose or what. But we were speculating as we are wont to do, because we're streaming for like 7 hours, I think, that night. You got to speculate about something. But to be clear, yeah, we were just kind of trying to figure out what's going on based on what we were looking at. And so this here you can see the tank farm got really active. Well, tank farm's out of this frame, but the GSC, because they're feeding the liquid nitrogen from pad A to SN7.1. Right now, it is on a transport mount. They had done some testing on pad B. You can see there to the right of it. You can even see the thrust simulator still installed on pad B there. I guess they don't want to damage anything on pad B, or don't want to risk the burst test damaging anything on their brand shiny new pad. So they put it on the transport mount, and they're feeding the liquid nitrogen from pad A over. So maybe that's just all that condensation is just a function of the temporary or what have you GSC that they have. So we don't know. Again, we don't. Basically, all my answers to this are going to be piles of we don't know. But so after we saw the activity from the GSC and tank farm, we saw the vehicle not really get frosty too much. It did seem to frost up a little bit, but and it did pressurize. We saw the dents go away, which is always fun to see, and it's a minor difference, but it's noticeable, and I feel like the vehicle just looks like, I don't know, even though it's a minor difference, it's substantial because the vehicle's like, okay, I'm ready to go. But yeah, so then we saw that those top vents get really active, and we were speculating whether that was a depressurization or whether that was just, nominal activity during loading, because when you fill a container, you have to void the space that's being filled, or vent the space that's being filled, because it has to, you get it. So that could have been either filling or depressing. We just really weren't sure. So there you go. You can see SN7.1 really wants to live. So it gets to live the weekend. And yeah, so that's about where it ended up. Some storms rolled through, and props to Mary for sticking it out and just dealing with all of the rain and everything. Conditions deteriorated extremely rapidly. The time lapse that's coming up in a couple shots after this is like, you can just see the image just get darker and darker and darker and darker as all of the light and everything gets obscured by all the rain and whatnot that's in the air. So yeah, props again to Mary for sticking that out and for bringing us the views despite the weather. What's the phrase, like, not rain nor shine nor sleet or snow. But yeah, so the conditions deteriorated and we kind of lost eyes on it briefly, but we don't think anything really happened, although we don't know, during the brief time that we lost visibility due to the weather. And then when we came back, we were back for a very short period of time. The road reopened, crews went back to the pad. Oh, I forgot something. In the middle there, after some of this venting activity, crews went back to the pad, but the road did not reopen. So they appeared to be inspecting a portion of the vehicle that is sort of, I don't know, again, thanks to Mary, we have these insane views from, I think it was like September 6th or 7th or so, when, in that daily video, she just happened to get super close up detailed shots of the exact area that ended up being inspected. And props to our members, thanks members for all your support. Some members in our member Discord pointed that out, and we were able to get that photo, not only in the daily video, but also we were using it on our stream. So yeah, you can see right here, they're up, and obviously stop me if I'm babbling too long. I can shut up.
You're good.
I'm just all coffeeed up. So, so yeah, you can see that's the area that they were inspecting. And I wish I knew more about what the heck all of that is, but I don't. I wish I did. Anyone has any speculation or any knowledge, feel free to throw that at NASASpaceflight in chat. Well, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit when I'm done flapping my gums. So they looked at that for a while. There was some sparks that came from one of those cables that you can sort of see near that area dangling down the length of the vehicle. We're not really quite sure where the heck those sparks came from. They seem to go back up on the lift for a second and take a look at it. And yeah, that's the crews left the pad. And again, the conditions deteriorated. They got better. We came back, and very shortly after that, the road opened. So we think they still have more testing to do. Obviously, SN7.1 didn't burst. It's entirely possible that it failed in some small little place that wasn't dramatic and wasn't too visible to us, and they'll patch it up and go again. Or it's possible it didn't fail at all. This is one of those things where, in the absence of a direct confirmation of the activities from Elon, we don't know, and we have to be clear. We're not quite sure what exactly happened, but we're based on, again, previous experience. This is what we think, and there you go. There's that shot of
Wow.
You can see how crystal clear and sharp the image was earlier, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And so that's what we saw. Hopefully, we'll see them get further into a burst test and kill 7.1 sometime soon here. When's the next road closure? I forget.
Is the 21st, which is this
All
coming
right,
Monday. So that is the next chance for SN7.1 to reach that test of failure. And Chris, I want to ask, where does this failure test kind of fit into the current status of Starship testing? What will this test accomplish, and how does it set up what comes afterwards?
Yeah, we're getting very close to having too many Starships to track to really know where we stand. But right now, we're okay. We've got Sn5 and Sn6. They have both hopped. We're calling them hop-proven space Starships, I should say. So those two are now relocated inside the high bay, which is moved away from the mid bay. So they're in the new building right now, sheltering from the weather, because the weather's been bad, as we've seen on that previous testing night. SN8 and SN9 are in the mid bay. SN9 is being stacked as we speak. and SN8 is pretty much stacked waiting for a nurse cone. SN8 can't test until SN7.1 has completed the burst test. So we're waiting for SN7.1 to die. Literally, they'll pull the remains off. If it's a dramatic failure, it might be just some leak, and they'll get a data and they'll just pull it off normally. And then SN8 will reel to the launch pad. SN8's nurse cone will then reel to the launch pad. We think they'll install the nurse cone at the launch pad. Again, SpaceX and it's Boca Chica. You never know. You got to keep an eye on things. But as you can see in that picture there, we just had up, SN8 has got a aero surfaces, the hinges at least installed inside the actual mid bay itself. So a lot of work's been done already. There we go. There's a picture in question. And we can see there, SN8 is the one in the middle. We've got Sn5 and Sn6, SN8 and SN9. SN9 is the small one, which is being stacked right now. So that's where we stand. The reason why we've got SN10 and SN11 being prepared for stacking is because if SN8 fails, which is very likely on such an ambitious test program, that they've got the next vehicles ready to go and repeat the tests and refine what they went wrong on SN8. If SN8 lands first time, which would be dramatically amazing, then they've got other vehicles to do further tests. They can go even higher than 60,000 feet, which is where SN8 is going to go to. So they have lots of options. That's the reason why they've got lots of Starships being built, is that they can test, fly, fail, fix, test, fly, fail, fix, and do that methodology of testing to allow them to do fast repeating, fast tests and get fast successes. And that is ultimately what's going to play into their schedule for the long term. So we're looking now just for Super Heavy to turn up on the stage. We think there's been some parts made for already, but as far as stacking goes, that's not begun yet. And we've had that confirmed by SN8, by Sn5 and Sn6 being put into the high bay for weather protection.
Excellent. So a lot of very exciting things coming up in Boca Chica. And of course, we're bringing you all the live coverage we can of all that. We've got these amazing daily videos that I'm kind of rolling in the background here from Mary, who's down there every day capturing all of this progress. And I think we're all you mentioned that SN8, if it lands the first time,
Yeah.
I would put significant odds that it won't, but maybe I'm pessimistic. I don't know. That belly flop landing maneuver is going to be dramatic, and if they nail that first try, I will be very impressed.
There's kind of like, yeah, I will also be very impressed. There's two sorts of I'm two minds about it. One, with 5, 6, and Starhopper, and really with landing Falcon 9, they seem to have they demonstrated such excellent control of these vehicles. And with 5 and 6, I had the similar thought as I do now with 8, where no way they're going to stick the landing. They're going to fly fine, but sticking the landing, that's the hard part. So while on the one hand, I think about SN8 landing and I'm like, no way, it's going to pancake right into the ground, just like, but then I think, well, I don't think they would necessarily try unless they were reasonably sure they could, have a chance.
At least it had a good chance,
Yeah, like 50-50. So hopefully they do stick the landing, because that means rapid progress. But if they don't stick the landing, one, I bet that they'll target the water rather than the actual landing pad until the last second, similarly to how they do with Falcon 9. And we haven't heard any sort of official word about this, but that's just my speculation and based on logic. Again, using the things that we already have seen with Falcon 9 and extrapolating, I bet they target the water, and then if the burn and belly flop and everything goes successfully and it relights, then it'll sort of go over to the landing pad. And that way, in case it does kerplode, technical term, it will hit the water and everything will be fine. And like Chris was saying, they have 9, 10, 11, and 12 all ready to go soon.
In various stages of preparation, yeah.
And this is the picture we're on right now. I want to point out that we've seen a delivery of a flat truck with a downcomer and legs for SN11. Now, we don't know if those downcomer and the legs were for SN11, but another part on the truck had SN11 on the actual labeling. Another truck then followed with a downcomer and legs. And this is the following truck as well. So this technically could be SN13 we're looking at right now. Technically could be SN13.
The last Starship to fly was SN6, and we're at parts for more than double that, up to SN13 being visible in Boca Chica. That's how ridiculous this is getting.
Yeah, I remember saying a few months back, maybe a few weeks back, what is time at this point? But I remember thinking, like, before 5's flight, and just like, man, they seem to sort of have paused. Maybe not paused, but like they took their foot off the gas for a second. And It seems like right around the time of fifth flight, maybe a little bit before. You know, there's a lag time between them spooling up and what we see on the outside. But of course, yeah, sometime around five's flight, it really seems like they just mashed the gas pedal, to use one of my favorite phrases. And it's just like, it's astounding. It's astounding the pace to which they have accelerated their development. And it's just, hey, guess what? Jack's excited about something. But no, I'm really excited to see the development accelerate because, you know, it's only going to lead to good things.
I want to get to a couple of super chats real quick, and then we've got a queue of questions about it really quick. David with a new membership, thank you so much for your support. Modi Space Industries, a regular on the show with the $5 super chat, thank you so much.
Every time.
Every time, he's always here. And Dougal, another regular, says SN8 on the first try. Thanks NSF and thanks Mary.
I'm fighting with Dougal now. Thank you for thanking Mary, Dougal. But we're fighting now because I don't like the use of the dash, and obviously Dougal's a member. Dougal's a good dude. He's messing with me with the tilde there. But yeah, some people put the dash like SN-8. I don't know. For whatever reason, it bothers me. I don't like the way that it looks, and I think it's technically wrong. But
I think
everything we've officially ever seen didn't have a dash.
Yeah, what I'll say is there's two ways of thinking about this. One is what Elon tweets. What Elon tweets is usually what you should go with.
Right.
The reason why some people put hyphens in is because the writings on a label sometimes have hyphens in. So you can understand where it comes from. But if you want to keep some kind of like commonality with things, I always go with what Elon says. So that's why we don't use the hyphen.
Yeah, and you know, maybe Elon will start using the hyphen tomorrow.
Yeah,
he's changed the naming scheme from the vehicles to, you know, from Mark .1 or whatever to SN. So things can change. But as of right now,
change the name, isn't it? Yeah, he's definitely going to change the name.
I'm team no hyphen. But anyways, at risk of making a whole bunch of trolls suddenly use the hyphen all the time, let's move on.
Okay, let's go into some questions here. Let's see. Jocelyn wants to know, will they just be leaving the thrust sim on pad B and have one for flight, one for proofing? What is the plan as far as thrust simulators and such? Anyone know? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Some speculation, maybe?
Like if they'll remove them? I mean, it sure seems like they're plumbing that pad. It seems like they're plumbing that pad like a full-scale pad. I don't know that it's meant to just be like a pressure test pad, which means it could be removed at some point. As for their plans to remove it, I couldn't say. They've definitely spoken about wanting to fly more rapidly, and two pads would help facilitate that. But you know, at what point does pad A and pad B sort of become or like take a back seat to the orbital pad? It's really just a matter of time before the orbital pad takes over.
Yeah.
And maybe that will be enough by itself to facilitate the rapid reuse, and pad B can just be a pressure test stand. But really, we don't know. But good question, Chris or Thomas. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to just say that the bottleneck right now is the mid bay, because they've got all the parts in the big tents. They've got three big tents, at least three big tents, where they're building all the sections, and then they do a lot of flipping outside. But as far as the mid bay stacking goes, they're always full now. And I do think that is their bottleneck at this moment. How much the high bay will come in and help out, I don't know, because it depends how much room's inside it to allow for maybe a stacking of a super heavy along with maybe some stacking of a Starship. So that's the thing I want to watch now, is just what they've got as far as capacity for stacking the vehicles, because that will really predicate how much they use the launch site itself. But as you said, Jack, the orbital launch mount is going to come into play very, very soon.
So give me an overview, because we've got the orbital launch pad. We've got pad, and then we got pad A and pad B at the suborbital launch complex, if you will. Which one is SN7.1 on right now?
It's on a transport mount next to or sort of in between pad A and B.
So it's not actually on either of the pads.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can see right now, good example. SN5 here is on a sort of a shorty transport mount on the roll lift. SN7.1 is on one of the older style, like taller transport mounts, but it's a similar kind of like steel girder type structure that they use to mount the vehicle to for when it's moving around on a roll lift. And so the speculation is, and I mean, I don't even think we could really say speculation at that point. I think it's just a matter of they don't want to risk damaging Pad B with all the work they've been doing on it. So they might as well just move it back to the transport mount that they brought it to the launch pad on, and then they can pop it and do it that way. So.
All right, gotcha. I know it wasn't too long ago that there was only one pad to talk about anyway, so
Yeah.
slightly different there.
Yeah, and just
we've
really
got-
quick, if you want to think about it like spatially in your head, just imagine you're driving towards the beach. You've already passed the build site and the tracking site on your left. So as you get to the beach, basically on your right is the launch site, and you first pass the tank farm, then you pass Pad A, and basically Pad A and B will be off to your right as you head down the beach. And then you keep going, and there'll be the landing pad, and you keep going, it'll be the orbital pad, you keep going, and it's wildlife preserve and then beach. So it's sort of all like it's like orbital pad, landing pad, Pad A and B, and then the beach is beyond the orbital pad. So hopefully my very technical, complicated hand gestures helped out.
And we're at the end of this video. Texas Tank Watchers merch. Get your Tank Watchers merch, guys, if you want. NASASpaceflight.com/shop. You can also get the shirt that Chris B's wearing right now.
Hello.
If that's kind of your deal. Let's move on. I've got one super chat question here. I'm not exactly sure. They might be talking about the thrust simulator. Jacob, do you know what kind of flight simulator they use? I don't know if they're talking about the thrust simulators or if they're talking like flight simulation hardware. I'm not sure. Like software. I'm not sure what they're exactly talking about there. The thrust simulator is the mount kind of in the middle of the it's the hydraulic rams in the middle of one of the launch mount, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see them sticking up out of Pad B right there to the right of Sn7.1, the very tips of them. It's very, they're pretty distinct. You can kind of tell at a glance on the pads. Exactly. I'm jealous that you get to do that.
I know. Das hooked me up with the telestration. I'm all good.
Yeah. He teased me the day with orange color on the telestration, and I was like, I want that. So maybe someday. But yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly in there. You can see it even better. And you can see the transport mount that it's on now versus Pad B, which is what we were just talking about.
Right, I see it. All right, so that's what we're talking about when we say like a thrust simulator, and that's the purpose of that device is to apply force kind of on the bottom of the test tank and simulate the forces that the tank would experience if Raptor engines were firing underneath it, which is important for a lot of the testing that they do on these things. But let's move right along. Let's see what other questions we have. Here's a question. Rito wants to know what's been going on at the Florida site at SpaceX recently. So we're talking about where they did construct the Mark II prototype, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot's been going on because they're in that transition phase of going from Cocoa to Roberts Road, which is a lot closer to the Kennedy Space Center. As far as facilities go, 39A has not seen any more construction of the launch mount on the side of the ramp to 39A. And of course, it is very different to what they're building in Boca Chica. So I wonder if they will either continue with that construction as it is or maybe replace it with something more similar to Boca Chica. Because obviously their design is changing all the time. And you can understand the launch mount design at Kennedy Space Center may have been for a different variant of Super Heavy because it is meant to be for Super Heavy and Starship as well. From 39A.
Honestly, I think the difference between the two is the one in Boca Chica is quick and dirty, get it done as fast as you can, minimum viable orbital pad. Maybe even not. Who knows if they'll be able to, what sort of vehicles they'll be able to actually handle, and how many engines the orbital pad at Boca will be actually able to handle. However, anybody who's been to Kennedy Space Center and done remote setups or even just seen the photos of the structures they're building for the Super Heavy pad at Kennedy Space Center, it's insane. It's a very huge, serious set of structures. So whatever they're building at Kennedy is probably much more representative of a full up, rapidly reusable, dare I say, like production launch pad or for lack of a better word,
operational launch mount.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Operational. That's a much better word. So whereas the one in Boca is more of just like, again, how quickly, how cheap, maybe not cheaply, but how quickly can we get an orbital pad that can handle the next stage of vehicle development that we need to go through? So, in this case, speed is of the essence because they can build a launch pad at Kennedy. They can do that, but they don't want to do it with vehicles and with a setup that is going to roast that historic pad. You don't want to have any kind of issues. So build all of that stuff now in Boca Chica, test it a million times, do what you need to do to get the data you need, and then when the system is mature and worthy, essentially, of Kennedy Space Center and of that launch pad, 39A, then we'll probably see them finish out that pad. And I honestly wouldn't be shocked if it looks exactly the same as it looks now. They just start progress on it again. But like you said, Chris, we don't know. It could end up looking very different. It could end up looking like what they have in Boca. But one thing really quickly I did want to say in regards to the orbital launch pad is the other day we had our 2-year anniversary of the last Delta II launch. And in going through my photos of the last Delta II launch, I noted that I somehow hadn't noticed before. I don't know what the water deluge system is at that pad, or was, I should say, but the actual pedestal itself is a cylindrical, like conical thing that Delta sits on, and then it diverts the flame 360 degrees all around. So there was no huge flame trench or anything for Delta II at that pad. So yeah, it's kind of it made me think like, maybe they can sort of support a super heavy with a sort of a 360 degree flame diverter type thing. And it is all the way over on the edge of the pad, and it's kind of like next to the water. And so, yeah, orbital pad seems pretty viable to me. I mean, it's going to be surprising to see what exactly they can fit on there, and hopefully it's a lot, because I want to see them do as much as possible from Boca. It's such a cool launch site.
Gotcha. And you did mention something that I think we were talking about just a couple of years ago. You mentioned, you don't want to fry Pad 39A. It's such a historic launch complex, and not just for the historic value, but 39A is also the home of all of their commercial crew missions. Obviously, you don't want to damage your infrastructure there. It's also where you have to launch Falcon Heavy missions. But people were talking about this when Falcon Heavy demo came about, February 2018. A lot of people, and Elon himself, said there's a decent chance this thing blows up in the first couple seconds. This is a really scaled up vehicle. There's a lot of risk involved. Elon was not confident that this was going to go as well as it ended up going. But a lot of people were like, this is a significant risk of torching one of the most historic launch complexes in the world if this thing doesn't get up very far off the pad. Luckily, that didn't happen. And of course, the Starship launch mount is not at the normal launch mount within 39A. It's kind of off to the side, a separate structure within the same complex. So it's a little different, but given how large Starship and Super Heavy are, if something were to go wrong really early in flight or before liftoff, that would put some serious damage around that launch complex. I think it is a very good point to say that they're going to test these things almost unnecessarily often in Boca Chica to make sure that they really have this system operating reliably and consistently at Boca Chica before you launch it anywhere else at Kennedy Space Center. Of course, there's also these offshore launch mounts, which Elon keep mentioning. And I'm curious what you guys think about the long-term implications of that kind of plan. Because you have Boca Chica where they're doing test things now. We know that Kennedy Space Center will be useful for like NASA missions or government missions where there's a lot of payload processing infrastructure around there and things like that. But it sounds like Elon or SpaceX kind of want the long-term situation to be most launches actually occur offshore launch mounts away from populated areas and land in general, just to reduce the impacts of noise and get road closures and all that kind of stuff. What do you guys think about that?
Well, that's what's going to that's going to happen. They're going to have the main Super Heavy launches, the one with the 28 Raptors as it is right now from 31, onto sea launch based platforms. So we know that's going to happen. That's what Elon has actually officially tweeted. So that's what the way it's going long term as far as that goes.
Yeah, and think about when Falcon 9 comes in and does those sonic booms, and the whole entire area needs to be warned. Hey, we're going to be doing sonic booms. It's the same kind of deal where when Starship re-enters and comes in from an orbital velocity, the pressure wave coming off of a vehicle that huge is going to be intense. I bet you if they landed a Starship from orbit at Boca Chica, I don't know, would that break any windows on South Padre Island, or even just at the build or production, the build site? So
We've
I
heard
don't.
what one raptor sounds like, don't we, Jack? One raptor's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer over here, but I do think people need to perhaps revisit their expectations of the sorts of flights that will take place from land. And to that effect, and this is honestly a great segue on your part, Thomas, although I'm destroying the segue by pointing out the segue, much like jokes. But no, one of our members, John Hansen, right before you started on this thread, said in chat, let's see. Oh God, I scrolled and I lost it. Okay, yeah, John Hansen said, probably never able to launch from the Cape with Super Heavy other than the occasional test. Needs a 30-kilometer clear zone, and Titusville, among others, will be too close. Have to see launch. So, yeah, I bet the same applies for Boca, and I bet basically they're right. Not only for launch, but also for landing. The types of, I mean, the scale of this vehicle is absolutely madness. And they're not going to be able to just do it anywhere. So we'll definitely see flights of increasingly large and perhaps maybe a full stack vehicle from Boca, who knows? But I find it extremely hard to fathom them ever being able to launch Starship and Super Heavy at anything close to a operational level from Boca. That level is going to require sea platforms, it seems, based on everything that we've seen from Elon tweets and from speculation that I've seen on the NSF forum and elsewhere. This vehicle's serious. And it cannot be operated safely near populated areas, at least not until we have a good amount of heritage and can trust it. So that's part of what makes these test programs so exciting, is you never quite know what is going to happen. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that we'll want to keep in mind as we set our expectations for what we expect to see in Boca, what we expect to see from Kennedy, and just what the future holds. I mean, I'm super excited for the day that we get to find out more of this, whether it's at the next Starship announcement or, SpaceX just comes out of nowhere and says, blam, here's this thing. So, yeah.
I think the important key that you brought up was flight heritage, and that's the key to getting to launches to places like Kennedy Space Center, because we know that the long-term goal is operational launches from Kennedy Space Center. That's why they're building a launch pad. That's why they're building a landing pad. They know that's the long-term plan, but like you said, you have to get all of this heritage from things they're doing at Boca Chica or these sea launch platforms before you can do that. So you have to prove the vehicle reliability beforehand, and then you don't need these giant experimental test flight kind of keep out areas where you can go to a more moderate operational procedure as far as keeping the area clear for these launches. I think that's a really good point. Let's go back into some more questions because the queue is growing. Let's see. Well, we have a very quick question. Emery wants to know, do you plan on live streaming the next test attempt on SN7.1? Can confidently say yes. If there's something happening in Boca Chica worth sharing, we're going to be live for it. So don't worry about that. We'll get your live coverage. Again, that next attempt no earlier than Monday based on road closures. So there you go. A question about Sn5 and Sn6. Why were they moved into the high bay? Was that a weather consideration, Chris?
Yeah, weather protection.
And I have a related question because there's some storms approaching Boca Chica, which would have played a part in that. How about these SpaceX facilities down in Boca Chica? Are they rated? Do we know about how well they're built to withstand hurricanes? We know the Gulf of Mexico area can produce some pretty severe storms that could affect these things. We saw a nose cone from a couple prototypes ago actually got damaged from a severe storm. I don't know if it was actually a hurricane, but what do we know about the facilities down there?
This is like a good question for Chris G or Mike Deep or one of our team members that is much more knowledgeable about hurricanes and weather and whatnot. Honestly, I can't really say other than I have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they've thought of this. Chris?
Right.
I have no idea. I mean, I would assume they know what they're doing and they would have built buildings to withstand certain amounts of serious weather, but I don't know what ratings they've got. I can only think of the VAB at the Kennedy Space Center. I think that can go to 4. Is it?
At least 4, yeah. I'm not sure if it's
Yeah.
higher, but I know all the buildings at Kennedy Space Center, and that's including like the SpaceX Horizontal Integration Facility, all the ULA facilities, like they're all hurricane rated to at least a certain point, because Florida gets hit all the time as well. So yeah, defer to the point that we're pretty sure SpaceX would have thought of this and has taken that into account, even though if we don't have anything
They'll
specific.
be reading our chat going, "Oh, damn! Why didn't we think about storms?"
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, it's a fair question because if you've been watching this stuff long enough, you remember Hopper and Hopper's nose cone getting blown over, and you know that's why Hopper flew without a nose cone. Which, man, that would have looked cool if Hopper had a nose cone. But at the same time, it looked almost even cooler because it didn't have one. It was really surreal to see that derpy-looking thing fly in the air. So, but yeah, so it's a valid question. Well, let's move on. Let's get some more. Speaking of questions.
Yeah, it's true. We've got some super chats that we'll go through really quick. Let's see. Ron Smith with the super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Rough Riders, thanks for the coverage. Any reason that what the new big red crane is being used for? Any ideas?
Nope. No idea.
Nope.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a
Maybe,
guess. It's gonna be
maybe.
used to lift something up and put it somewhere else.
You know what?
That's
It
a
might be. It might be for nose cone stacking.
Okay.
Oh, it could be.
I'd guess.
Yep.
It's a guess,
Is it at
but
the
a good
launch
guess.
site or is it at the production site?
Again, that's a guess, but we think at the launch site, it'd make more sense to roll the two parts out together on the roll lifts and then stack them at the launch pad.
Yeah, so that would make a lot of sense. But I bet, you know, Mary's been out there shooting today. I've got a daily video to edit after this NSF live. So I bet we'll see whatever that crane's going to be used for. They've already started to assemble it. It might even already be fully assembled as of today. I haven't looked at the footage yet. So I bet we'll find out soon, either one way or the other.
Awesome. We've got a question from Graham here about SN8. So we know SN8 will be one of the first prototypes to fly, actually the first prototype to fly with a nose cone on board. And we've seen on some previous vehicles, there's been like COPV tanks and wiring kind of on the exterior, just kind of stuck on the side of like Sn5 and Sn6. For SN8, do you think they will move those things into the nose cone to keep the outside shape a little more smoother and more polished?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I'm wondering if the stuff will go inside tanks or if that stuff will go sort of in the inner stage area or if it'll stay on the sides where it's mounted now because SpaceX is all about test as you fly and just get covered up with like some strakes or some aero covers or some sort of aerodynamic surface that we're not seeing yet. It's a very good question. And yeah.
All right, so there you go. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll get a good idea once SN8 gets fully stacked, which again we're thinking might happen at the launch site. They'll roll out the two big pieces. Another super chat here. Oh wait, hold on. Is it? Oh yeah, super chat from Andre just wants to say that Chris B is the man. So shout out to Chris B there in super chat.
That's a very good question, and I agree with it.
Thanks, Andre. Super chat from Tyler who says, love the content. Wondering if there's an established restriction area map around Boca Chica. We know KSC puts out maps for all the hazard areas and things like that. Has anyone seen, Chris, do you know, have we seen anything about a specific, this is where all the checkpoints or like hard checkpoints will be for Starship launches from Boca Chica? Or is that kind of a change on a case-by-case basis?
No, we've only seen the ones for the hops, the 150-meter hops, but I don't think we've seen any maps or anything. We just know the way they do road closures, don't we? So, and they'll have that exclusion zone based on the county website. So I don't think we've seen any maps. I think we've guessed maps before. We've seen people did it on Twitter where they've guessed the area where they'd have an exclusion zone because we had that wayward bird, didn't we, on one of the static fire tests for SN6. There isn't a real it's not like Kennedy Space Center where you got like a Coast Guard range area where you've got to restrict the ships. So I think it's quite complicated where that goes. So yeah, as far as SN8, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see that, wouldn't it? Because it's going to be some flight.
And then we got one last super chat here from Gregory. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you everyone who's doing, super chats, memberships. That all goes into improving our content, getting new equipment and things like that, especially for all our live streams. So appreciate all the support, and we're doing exciting things with all that support, so stay tuned. But let's go right back into some more questions here. We have a question from Corbin who wants to know, is SN10 a super heavy prototype? Chris, what do you think?
Yes, it is. I think that the way Elon is saying it is, did you say Starship prototype?
He wants to know if SN10 is a super heavy, the booster.
Oh, but I thought I misheard that. Yeah, it's not. No, we think SN9, SN10, SE11 are all Starships.
Okay.
They're Starship prototypes. As far as Super Heavy goes, we've not seen anything with a label on it yet. That would be the confirmation. There's
Mhm.
every chance that some parts are out in the open, which will be for Super Heavy, but you're guessing, really. All I know now is we thought it was a case where SN9, SN10, SN11 were Starships, and then Elon pretty much confirmed it by saying if SN8 fails, they have 9, 10, 11 ready to go. So that confirms it for me that they're all Starships.
All right, there you go. I have a question for Jack here, the resident who's been down to Boca Chica a few times. You saw the Mark 1. The Mark 1 nose cone is still hanging out there in Boca Chica, right?
Yep.
Any guesses on what they might do with that?
They're using it to shame the other Starship articles into being less denty. No, that's a good question. And it's definitely starting to be the case that a lot of these articles, sick wheelie, Treddy, a lot of these Starship articles, I was talking about the thing on the screen.
Oh.
A lot of stuff is stacking up. You know, there's SN2 sitting there. There's the Mark 1 nose cone sitting there. I mean, I wonder if SN7.1 doesn't fail dramatically, will they just wheel it back to the launch site and it'll sit there next to SN2 and be you know, sort of another just article floating around the test site. So at a certain point, you would think that they would start scrapping these things, but who knows? I'd be very curious to find out what happens to the Mark 1 nose cone. Surely it's not usable, nor would they want to use it, given that they have so many other nose cones built, ready to go, or I shouldn't say ready to go, but built, and they're much better quality since they're, you know, successor nose cones to the Mark 1. So yeah, I'm not sure if they'll do anything with it. It's curious that they've just sort of left it there. I don't think it's been moved since the Mark 1 pop or whatever. I think it's just been sat there for however long, which is kind of crazy considering how much of the site has changed, how much has been moved around and retweaked and whatnot, and yet the Mark 1 nose cone remains right where it is. I mean, I wonder if there's some sentimentality on the part of Elon or somebody else or something that's just, let's just leave that there. You know, it's curious. That'd be a good question for those people who are able to get a reply from Elon on Twitter. It'd be a great thing to ask. Like, yo, dude, like, I mean, definitely ask technical questions. I love when people do that and we get a whole bunch of info blast and like we learn about Raptor stuff and all that kind of stuff. That's really awesome. But also sometimes I'm just like, hey man, what are you doing with Mark 1 nose cone? I'd love to know. So yeah, great question.
All right, well, we'll stay tuned on that. We got a questions here about the differences between SN5 and SN6, which are both pretty much identical, versus the new SN8 prototype. Ak wants to know, is there a difference between the legs that we saw on the two prototypes that just flew versus the new SN8 prototype that's going to do a new high altitude, high velocity test flight? Chris, is there a difference there in the landing legs?
Yeah, there is a slightly longer leg version of moved. I don't know if they've moved on for SN8, but we know the ones that are arriving now, at least the latest set of legs that arrived, are noticeably longer. So they've gone for the longer version, which Elon has mentioned on Twitter as well. A lot of things are speculation as far as Starship goes, educated speculation, I should say. But when Elon confirms it, that helps, and he has confirmed he have moved on to a longer variant of the leg.
And is that confirmed to be for SN8, or could that be farther down the line?
Yeah, we don't know which one it's confirmed for. We just know that was the basis. They were going to move on to longer legs. We then noticed on one of the truckload arrivals, especially one of the later ones, that the legs have got longer. Mary noticed it straight away. She said these legs are longer. So that's where we knew they're making a transition. But for what Starship that transition will be installed for, we don't know yet.
Gotcha. And then kind of a similar question, we're talking about the differences between the SN5 and SN6 vehicles versus SN8. Why did SN5 and SN6 not have the aerodynamic surfaces, the flaps, that we're expecting to see on SN8, Jack?
Because SN8 is the one that's going to be doing the belly flop, right? So it's the aero surface is all about the belly flop maneuver. So 5 and 6 just went straight up, straight down, over a little bit, you know, translated a little bit. Whereas presumably, I mean, do we know this? I don't know if we know this or not yet, but presumably the way that flight, oh, and I saved a note with information about this. Stand by. Presumably, I said that enough times, the flight for SN8 will be straight up-ish, maybe go out over the water slightly, but it will not be firing its engines the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
We're guessing that it will basically accelerate to a point, cut its engines, coast to apogee, and then at apogee enter some form of a belly flop. I mean, maybe not a super extreme like 90-degree belly flop. Maybe all it does is do something like this, and just enough to slow its descent a little bit. Who knows? I don't. But that is why you would put aerodynamic surfaces on 8, because it is not going to be under powered flight the whole time, and it needs to validate part of that belly flop maneuver and landing, and the Raptor relight, all of that. So, I guess we do know that there's going to be a Raptor relight based on Elon tweets. So there you go. The Raptor engines are going to shut off at a certain point, and there goes your control authority, because at that point all you're doing is going off of RCS thrusters. So the body flaps give you some measure of control authority there during the belly flap.
And it's important to note that it won't just be one Raptor engine. We think it'll be 3 Raptor engines. That's the whole central cluster of the overall Starship engine configuration. You'll have 3 Raptors powering that flight because it's going to much higher altitude. So that's another part of it. Not only is it going to be the first in-air relight of Raptor, but it'll be in-air relight of 3 Raptors at once after a launch powered by 3 Raptors. So that's another thing they're testing, multiple Raptors firing at once, which we haven't seen yet. Let's keep going on. We got a question back to the Starship at KSC. How would Starship be transported from Boca Chica to KSC? Do you think they'll do that, or do you think anything that launches from KSC is going to be built in Florida? Chris?
No, I don't think they will transport them to Florida from Boca Chica. I mean, it's possible they could do it because they've done that route when they've taken equipment from Coco to Boca Chica, to Brownsville. Or that port, Brownsville, I should say. So we know they can do that route by ship, but I think the long-term goal is to use Robert Roads and build a large facility there for making Starship vehicles, so they can just roll them to Kennedy Space Center from there. Again, Boca Chica is such a large facility. You think they'll be producing so many Starships, they could easily just ship some to Florida, but I don't think they will. I don't see the point of having 2 sites like a Roberts Road site if they're going to just use Boca Chica for production.
Right.
I mean, if they need to pump out just the sheer volume of these ships, I mean, think about a lunar Starship or whatever, or a Mars Starship. How many refuelings that's going to take? It takes one launch to launch the vehicle itself, then another launch or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 just to refuel it. I mean, that is so many launches. It's going to require so many vehicles. Maybe you need 2 production sites for that.
That's a very good point. I like that you brought up the Lunar Starship, which is, again, a huge part now of the Starship development program. At first, it was just, this is the next generation SpaceX vehicle. It's going to be way down the line. They want to have a bunch of different variants. Eventually, it's going to, serve its purpose of getting people to Mars, etc. And then last year, Starship was selected as a potential moon lander in the relatively near term for NASA. And so now when you're watching all these Starship tests, this is an integral part of the Artemis program now. And I want to tie this into some other testing that happened this week that wasn't Starship testing. Chris, can we talk about a little bit of this, the Sls Gimbal Testing? Because this is another piece of this Artemis program that we've been watching. And basically tell us about this test that happened this week.
Right. Well, first of all, this is the 5th test. The funny thing about this is they put the video on a NASA.gov imagery site, which a lot of these specialist people who followed all these program testings always keep an eye on. When they found it, we tweeted it out, and we tweeted out that it was from 2 weeks ago. And then suddenly after we tweeted it out, everyone started tweeting it, like SLS's official account. Jim Bridenstine was tweeting it out. It's like, oh, look at this milestone test we completely forgot to put online. So that was the hilarious part of this, where it was a test where they did a very good video on it, showing the actual thrust vector control system at work with the 4S25s, but they forgot to put it online. So yeah, it's all another great milestone towards this green run test, which is going to be the milestone test for the first SLS rocket to launch. It's a critical test because we're going to talk about Boca Chica and talking about how they can afford to fail. And it will be helpful for them in some ways because the next vehicle along will gain from the experience. This one can't fail. If this one fails on the test stand during the green run, they are going to be delayed by about 2 years. because the next vehicle is being built as you speak, but of course there'll be changes to it, there'll be investigations of what went wrong. So we're looking at a 2-year delay to SLS, which could be critical for the program. So they need to get this right. And that's why they're going through these series of tests for the green runs. They're going through literally a month worth of testing before they go for this green run, which they're at right now, where they're just literally checking things like the steering of the vehicle nozzles, which is what this is. This is what the test is all about. So yeah, that was a good test. Apparently it went well. And they're on to the final stages now of getting ready for this green run test as soon as next month.
And I'm
I love
gonna
this.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just love. It's me being goofy, but I love the wiggle video. It's so great. And I if I had time and a working computer, I would make a little like, is it Sesame Street or the Muppets or something? It's like phenomena. Like you can just make the wiggle. Like it would. There's something there. Someone needs to edit that. Phenomena. Like it's perfect. It's adorable, but it's a rocket. It's a massive, extremely expensive, extremely powerful rocket, and yet it's doing little wiggles. I love it so much.
What I'm impressed by this video is that it was real time. It wasn't sped up or time lapse or anything like that, because you can see the engineer in the bottom there. He was, proving it was real time. That's a lot more steering and a lot faster steering than it was during Shuttle. So that's the beefed up thrust vector control system, which you'd expect for a bigger rocket. But yeah, during Shuttle, we did see them gimbal before launch, about 2 minutes before launch. They did a gimbal check with the vehicle's nozzles, and it was a lot slower and a lot more pronounced in this. So there's certainly some changes there where the steering of the RS-25 nozzles has been improved. So that's one thing that's worth your billions.
Hashtag wiggles for science.
Yeah. But yeah, another thing about these engines we're looking at right now, I want to bring up because it's going to be an opportunity to do my once a stream mention of Shuttle. So we can confirm the 4 engines you're looking at there right now are all Shuttle veterans. We're looking at 2060, 2058, 2045, and 2056. They have all flown with Shuttle several times before, so they are flight experience vehicle engines, and they will fly one final time, which I find to be a positive. I know chat is going to blow up with saying we're going to throw in the ocean, but I do think, excuse me, I do think that's better than putting them in museums. I would say that because there are RS-25s in museums and exhibits. There are false engines on the orbiters in display, but they look like engines, so that's fine. I think if given the chance, go on, Jack. You're going to say something because I'm going to cough for a second. So go
on. Is it the case that there are RS-25s in museums, or is it just the nozzle extension and the power head and all that isn't even present? So if you're seeing an RS-25 in a museum, if your argument is they shouldn't be flown and thrown away, they should be in a museum, it's like, well, dude, they're just putting the nozzles in museums. The rest is a facsimile. As far as I know, I could be wrong.
This came up before, so I do know there's 2 ways of looking at this. There's no Block 2s, as far as we know, Block 2 SSMEs on display as such. I think they've got a few spares which will never fly, which they can put in museums. There's several Block 1s on display from earlier in the Shuttle program. The 3 orbiters which have retired have all got what's called RSMEs, which are fake engines. for a hashtag for you there. They are literally just old nozzles put on sticks on these metal rods, and they were installed to look like they were main engines. So they are not real engines on display with the orbiters themselves. So that's where we stand with the museum exhibits. But all the flight working engines which were able to be reused were donated to SLS.
All right, I'm going to tie this back into Starship because we were talking about earlier the very different test ideas between SpaceX and some of the other folks. And we're talking about Green Run. If something goes wrong during this hot firing of SLS, the SLS program is delayed for at least 2 years, if not more.
Yeah, it would be terrible for the program. That's why I've been so careful about this, because you have to get it right. I think they can afford things like aborts. One engine shutting down, they'll abort, redo the test later. If the core stage starts leaking, that's bad. Right. I mean, there's always that risk. During the RS-25, the single engine testings on Stennis, we had 1 engine fire when he aborted. It was ground support equipment fault there. So you could see something go wrong, like a fire in the engine bay or whatever like that, but it might not be the core stage at fault itself. So we've got to be careful about what kind of failure we're talking about. And the catastrophic failure that I'd be worried about
Mm-hmm.
is very unlikely to happen because
Right.
of all the testing they've done so far. So it's just mainly used for comparison towards what SpaceX do
Yeah.
with Starship, where they can afford to fail. With SLS, you can't really afford to fail. So that's why it's more of a longer test cycle because they're being so much more careful.
I want to ask for comparison. When did I know the Green Run, everyone thinks of the hot fire test that's coming up, but in reality, there's like 8 or 9 different tests that are all part of this Green Run of testing with the
Yeah.
core stage. When did the first test happen for this core stage?
That's a very good question. Ooh, did someone ask that in chat?
No, this is me
No,
asking
you
for
just
a
thrown it at me,
comparison.
haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot, and I
We
apologize.
know. Well, the problem was there was a delay because of COVID. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
it's all started happening when this all started going wrong with the restrictions at the centres. I'm gonna just bring it up this way. Won't Philip's loss on the actual
Okay.
chat thing here. But yeah, I mean, here we go. I mean, back in June, they're powered up. So it was already
Okay.
on test stand then. It was on test stand in May. I'm scrolling back. Because we do so many articles on SLS,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised we haven't got, April, it was on the test stand. It had arrived. It was February, it was on the test stand. It was shipped in January. So it arrived in January. End of January, it arrived at the core stage. So there you go. It's been on
All right,
there
so
all year.
Right, so let's be a little conservative and say it started testing in February. All right. This is a single core stage for a single SLS vehicle. Where was SpaceX Starship testing in February of this year?
Ooh.
What
Good
was
question.
happening this past February? Where were we at that point?
You know,
In
we should
Starship?
script these questions,
Yeah,
shouldn't we?
Boca Chica.
Oh, I know. I was in
Go on.
Boca Chica in late February, and they were stacking Mark 1.
They were stacking Mark 1.
Wow.
I would like to point
Yeah.
out a very big comparison here about how many vehicles, granted, SN1, Michael has just corrected me in the earpiece, SN1 was being
Thank you.
stacked in
Sorry.
February.
But still,
Which
that's still impressive.
again, SpaceX naming schemes back at work. But so my point is, in the same amount of time, SpaceX has gone from Starship SN1 to now they are preparing Starship SN8. And in that time, they have gone about halfway through a test program for one SLS core stage. That shows distinctly the difference in these two different testing philosophies, I guess, where test things rapidly and expect a lot of them to break versus thoroughly test one vehicle to ensure that it doesn't break. And those are two very different strategies. And there's, depending on the outcome, it's hard to say which one is actually more successful. You might say, oh, well, clearly SpaceX has built all these different vehicles. Yeah, but a lot of them are broken. So, which obviously is part of the test program, but they're still both in development and preparing for flight. So it's I'm just pointing out that distinct difference in how.
Yeah, but let me just say for objectivity's sake, it's so hard to compare them because it's so obvious to compare them. You think SLS versus Starship. Elon can't do that. He has been unable to resist temptation to say it a few times that he doesn't like SLS. But it's a NASA vehicle, and they've got to work with NASA, and NASA's got to work with SpaceX. And they can't go all out war on Twitter about it. It'd be just not good for business.
Right.
But also, the Starships we're looking at right now, we're on to SN8 nearly with 3 Raptors. That's getting into the class now. But SLS, the first SLS rocket, is a full beyond Earth orbit. Beyond Earth orbit. Thank you. Put my teeth back in. Capable vehicle. This is a proper rocket. So we're busy looking at these Starships now on view, and you can't really compare that with the core stage of SLS. That is a proper rocket that's going to be flying to the moon. Now eventually the way the test cycle is going is Starship will overtake. And I think it's only a matter of time. I think it's going to be overtaken. It's going to cost so much less than SLS that I think there's a clock that's ticking down for SLS. I think SLS will get 2 or 3 flights out of it before it becomes so obviously unviable compared to Starship that there will be a political move to change it, even regardless of all the political, this is my state that gets money from SLS and what have you. I think they can work deals where they do this state will get the contract for the lander, or this state will get the contract for this or the other. I think they can get around it. But I think the way it's looking at is, I think Starship will be unless there's something catastrophically go wrong with it, I think it's just a matter of time before it overtakes SLS. And I do like SLS because I'm so used to Shuttle. I'm used to the engines. I'm used to the tankage and whatever. But it's so obvious.
I think. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Darn it. Whoops.
I will come back to it. I do have. You mentioned that you think SLS is going to get 2 or 3 flights. How many RS-25s are around from
Right.
Shuttle to support flights?
Right. There's enough
Sorry,
for at least 4 flights. Go on, Jack. You try and throw it. You talk, Jack. While I go searching for engines. Go
you're saying that you're thinking SLS will only get a couple flights before Starship Steamroller comes along.
Yeah.
And that very well could be. But part of me, I know it's sunk cost fallacy or whatever, but part of me is like, man, we've already done all the tooling. We've already paid all the money to restart all of these production lines. And shout out to that awesome Tim Dodd, Everyday Astronaut, Artemis versus Apollo video that he did. He really explains how, budgeting wise, once we've paid down all the tooling and all the costs of restarting all the production lines, once you start getting into the Artemis like 6 and 7 territory, things get pretty cheap. I mean, not as cheap as we would like, obviously, but the costs come down. So yeah, that's a thing. It would kind of be sort of heartbreaking in a good/bad way to see SLS only get a couple flights before the Starship Steamroller comes and takes it over, given that how much we've paid to start up all the production lines and whatnot. But I mean, the future is reusability, and SLS is not a reusable rocket. So get the heck out of here.
There's so many problems though with that. Is the cost of the program isn't really relative when you think about the fact that they're going to be launching Block 1B on a brand new mobile launcher costing $1 billion, which they've just started to build now.
Insane.
So
it's insane.
There's so many ways they can fix around it where it just costs even more, it costs even less, but whatever. But the idea is that on the question of engines, there's 14 of which previously flew with Shuttle. The 2 other ones are actually development engines they were using at Stennis, but they've rebuilt them into proper flight engines, so they've been included, and they will fly on the second one, which is the first crewed launch. So the first crewed launch of SLS, which is the second launch of SLS, will have 2047 and 2059 from Shuttle, and the new engines, which are 2065 or 2063, I should say, and 2062. So that's an interesting thing where they're going to use 4 Shuttle veterans for the test flight, but for the actual first crewed launch, they're going to use 2 brand new engines. So yeah, that's an interesting decision to make. But that's what they've got. They've got enough engine stock right now for 4 SLS launches with flight spares, and then they'll move on to the RS-25E, which is the reusable version. So the expendable version. You can think of that. Just put that into context for a second. We're going to be using the reusable RS-25s, the first 4 launches of SLS, before moving on to the evolved expendable RS-25 engine.
Yeah,
that's the backwards way
around
around doing it, isn't
it? Yeah, and how much money it costs to make a reusable engine expendable. Oh, God. Anyways, going to what we're seeing on screen really quick, just my own question. When do you think we'll see the first Starship in orbit refueling? Just because we just saw that play out on screen.
Oof.
I have no idea. I'm hoping
that was a hard move, Thomas. That was a hard move.
Yeah, I'm going to go for I'm just looking at Super Heavy's launch now. I think with the 2-engine prototype, there's a very good chance they can launch early next year. But as far as the actual the big tasks of on orbit refueling, God, that's a hell of a thing to do.
It's kind of a big milestone.
Yeah,
I kind of think of it sort of like an Apollo 8 level milestone for Starship, for the Starship program. Like once they do an orbit refueling, it's like, okay, let's do a couple more checkouts and go to the moon or what have you. Obviously, gross oversimplification, but point being, that's a big step. I don't know. I'm always dazzled by this simulation whenever I watch it, so I just had to bring that up. Sorry.
I think if I'm going to throw my own speculation in the ring here, I think, next year the Super Heavy hop and give it maybe 1 more year before an actual orbital launch attempt. So let's say 2022 conservatively. The first vehicle to go to orbit will probably not have the on-orbit refueling systems. It'll be test that the system can reach orbit and then test that the vehicle can come back from orbit as the main test objectives for that flight. But shortly after that, one of the next things they'll want to test is this on-orbit refueling thing, because that's so critical to supporting any of the moon missions that they want to do for HLS program. And that's something that is supposed to happen less than 2 years later, 2024. So That's going to be something they want to test pretty quickly. So depending on where all the vehicles are at as far as flight readiness, as far as Starship prototypes go, at when they make that first orbital launch attempt, I could see another orbital launch designed to test on-orbit refueling happening pretty quickly after that. I don't know, Chris, do you agree?
You know, I'm just looking at chat, and most people were saying 2022, 2023. I agree with that. I just want to bring up someone who mentioned a comment. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Jacob says he was mentioning that we're all SpaceX fanboys. You know what? I started this site for Shuttle because it was just Shuttle. That's all there was. And we've progressed to covering all the vehicles. And the reason why we talk about SpaceX the most and why we cover it the most is because they're doing the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you want others, we cover every vehicle there is. We cover SLS, we cover anything that's flying. The fact that we're talking about SpaceX the most is because they're doing the most. So, you know, celebrate the fact. Don't think we're, you know, pushing everything else to the side. They are just the most active ones around. So there you go. I had to get off my chest.
Yeah, I love me some ULA. I love Virgin Orbit, Virgin Galactic. I love Rocket Lab. You know, if you're sending stuff into space, if you're dealing with rocket science, if you're on the bleeding cutting edge of technology and science, man, I'm right there with you. Whether it's SLS or otherwise. I mean, heck, I want to see Blue Origin do some launches. Let's lead some Blue Origin launches. I would love to cover some of that. I mean,
yeah,
anything. If it's on the bleeding edge of science and technology, I'm there.
I want to tell you, we've got a bunch of questions related to like Artemis program and stuff now, so I want to jump into that kind of stuff. And we have one question here about Dragon XL. We had some Dragon XL news come out this week, and I'm actually going to pull up. We did a very small bit here. I'm going to pull.
Oh man, I missed it.
I mean, okay, it's nothing like super exciting. I'm going to pull up Michael's tweet here. SpaceX was awarded $1 million to mitigate the effects of not being authorized to proceed into Dragon XL development yet, which is this weird thing. Basically, NASA hasn't been allocated the money to actually just begin development of this cargo vehicle. For those who do not know, Dragon XL, I'm going to pull up the render again, is this spacecraft, which will launch on Falcon Heavy rockets. It's a cargo Dragon variant that will be used to supply the lunar gateway and lunar orbit, bring cargo and supplies to the astronauts on Artemis missions. And just this week, we got this bit of news where they haven't been authorized to actually begin vehicle development yet. And thus, there was this weird risk mitigation contract that SpaceX was awarded because that authority hasn't been given yet. I'm not sure more detail. What kind of implications might this have, Chris?
You know what? I never really understand these things. And I'm quite happy I don't, because it's something that I'd probably get bogged down with. As far as it looks on paper, it could be quite clever. It's a kind of way of saying, look, you know, we're a bit delayed with all this business, but there's a bit of cash to keep everything fresh and ready to go when we are ready to go ourselves. So I think that's the way it's been presented, but I don't know. I just find it very much NASA budget kind of like information, and it always baffles me sometimes the way things are allocated. You know, we're allocating 1.5 billion to ground support systems. I'm thinking, oh great, you know, what's that mean? Mobile launcher? All right, so yeah, I don't know. I'll pass it over to Jack and you guys.
Yeah, I mean, humans are not good at a lot of things. I mean, the brain is an amazing device, but it's extremely hard to wrap your head around $1.5 billion. I mean, I can't. That is so much money. And if you even just equate it to like Falcon Heavy launches or what have you, or Starship launches, notionally, you know, once we don't know quite what that'll end up happening because the Starship system isn't done yet. But yeah, it's just $1 billion. What you can do with that amount of money is positively absurd.
Really quick super chat question back to Boca Chica. Is Zeus still there? Zeus, the Boston Dynamics robot dog. Have we seen Zeus out and about recently?
I mean, I imagine it's still there, but we haven't seen it lately. So who knows, Chris?
No, I was going to say we've definitely not seen it in any clips yet or any photos recently, but I think that's a very good sign, because you only bring him out ready when something's going badly wrong on the pad, and they don't want to put workers there. So yeah, I think. I
wonder if they'll bring him out once SN7.1 pops to do some inspections.
Yeah,
before
I bet we'll next see him then. Yeah. So
there you go. All right, back to some more. All right, we got a very broad question. This is a pure opinion question, so here we go.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna start with Jack because he said, "Oh boy." what do you think was going to happen with the Artemis project? So, what is your outlook here on the landers, SLS, Starship, how all of these fit in? What do you envision happening with the Artemis program? How do you think this goes about in the next couple of years? Any
Honestly,
wild speculation?
Yeah, the 10-foot pole the 10-foot pole that I will poke this with is obviously it's not news to anybody that the U.S. is in an election year, and famously, when we switched over from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, there was sort of a change of priorities. Basically, NASA is sort of at the whim of the current administration, and the hope is that the Artemis program can sort of bridge whatever happens during the election and continue to move forward. So hopefully that is the case. It is, of course, always possible that something happens during the election and priorities change. But yeah, I sincerely hope that the Artemis program just gets, goes full tilt, full speed ahead, because we really should be back on the moon by now.
Chris,
so hopefully
thoughts?
that's what I hope happens. I don't know what's going to happen. Sorry.
You're good. Chris, thoughts?
I think it'd be a real shame if they cancel SLS right now, for example.
Yep.
I think that'd be wrong. I think, especially when it's so close now. If they're going to cancel it, should have done it 4 years ago.
Yep.
That's what I would have said. So, now they're going to push forward with it. And I think they've got enough, really, they've gone far enough along to launch 3 missions. I think if they can get this 2024, which I think is extremely doubtful, by the way, this 2024 moon target, which they're already refining to be not on the pole, it's going to be now on the equator where the polar sites are, despite the fact that NASA's own rules are you can't land there. So, well, that one out. I think they're trying to do the best to protect 2024. I think the only way they can do that is to keep SLS going full tilt ahead and hoping for the best. But I think after that, all bets are off, especially with Starship around.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and just corollary say, if Starship, Moonship, whatever gets selected as one of the human landers, we'll make 2024.
Yeah.
But that's a huge guess, obviously. But SpaceX, man, they don't mess around.
We have a question here. We were talking about reusability earlier. Someone wants to know, I believe the answer is no. Dominic, will the solid rocket booster be recovered like the space shuttle we're talking about SLS launches?
Nope.
I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Why is that?
I can answer that one. Right. So the reason they're not going to during Shuttle, they had a 4-segment booster, which came back through on parachutes and was recovered. The reason for recovering it was not the same as Falcon 9 boosters, where they recovered it and reflowed them. They recovered them mainly for the post-flight information on how they performed, so they could check out the boosters in the inner workings and see how it performed. Any problems with it, they could refine for the next boosters. They then reuse the casings, to clean the casings out, and they would reuse the casings by refilling them into another booster. That could have been done with the 5-segment booster, but unfortunately, Ares 1 couldn't launch the vehicle, couldn't launch Orion's mass to the point it had to make Orion what's called a zero-base vehicle, which was basically stripping out all its capability. And that also required for the recovery systems of the boosters to be removed. When the boosters were moved to a twin booster setup with SLS, they could not add the parachute system back in because it had been deleted from the database. And it was too much work to reinstall it. So they decided to make the boosters expendable. So the reason why is because Ares 1 couldn't lift enough.
I made the mistake of asking a question that Chris could use to bash Ares 1, so that's on me, I guess.
Honestly, that was kind of amazing that you didn't bring up Ares 1. Chris did.
I told Chris I wasn't going to bring up Ares 1 today, but...
you just did by asking that question.
But I do want to point out, we were talking about the RS-25s have flown on shuttles before. Haven't the casings for the first couple SLS missions come from shuttle hardware?
Yeah. They're basically going to use all the casings that had remaining from shuttle on the final boosters before they have to go on to what's called a bowl booster or the advanced booster at least. So that's what they're doing. That is the tight end of all this schedule, is that for their boosters to be moved on to the advanced boosters is when they run out of casings, literally. So that is it. That is the simple fact that they're using casings from shuttle. So there's some reusability, but it's the kind of, again, it's the wrong way of doing it. So, reusability with a restriction attached to it.
Right. All right, going back to the landers portion of the HLS program, I know Dynetics, SpaceX, and Blue Origin's led national team with a couple other companies. These are the three landers that are actually going to be down selected pretty soon. Next January, they're supposed to, from these three, select either one or two to actually proceed into some further development. So one of these teams will probably, at least one of these teams will likely get kicked out of the program, for lack of a better word, coming up. And we have some questions about that kind of process. Someone wants to know, why is NASA backing Blue Origin? We barely see anything from them in terms of launches and advancements. I can't see why NASA can back them with so little progression. We've seen this year, I mean, the one most obvious sign we see of Blue Origin doing things is these new Shepard launches, which is proving their precision landing capability, which is a huge part of landing things on the moon. And one of their big points is like why they're building the descent element of their lander. We haven't seen a single new Shepard launch this year. We might see one coming up actually as soon as next week, believe it or
Yeah.
not, based on some new reports a couple days ago. But all this year, we haven't seen a single new Shepard launch. There's also been fairly little progress publicly about New Glenn hardware. The one thing we have seen is New Glenn launch site hardware. The launch site is going up very quickly. Huge hangar there now, two lightning towers, one of which is like a umbilical tower, huge water tower for the water system. So we know they're making progress. What's the kind of discrepancy there? We just don't see a whole lot publicly, but maybe there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Maybe that's why NASA is confident enough to, yeah, we want them to be part of development of one of these landing systems. Chris, what do you think?
I think the landing system is quite separate from what their facility is for New Glenn. Because especially with the way they can use the launch system on different vehicles and what have you. But yeah, it's one of those things where Blue Origin does not talk in public, and that's why we don't find much out, and that's why they like the idea of secrecy being their kind of like defensive shield for problems they may be incurring. The problem with that is that people do talk, and they are having trouble. They're having trouble with the engines. And that was pretty much confirmed by the fact they were trying to hire a brand new program lead for the BE4 and BE4 Block 2 for both engine variants. They needed a new project manager to lead that program of your new engine. That is pretty bad, where you have to rehire staff. I know a lot of people have left as well, but as far as what we can say, you have to be so careful as well, because it is people involved. You want them to be successful. These are people who have hired from the best of the best from the companies around Florida, with extremely high wages, the best wages. They're the best payers in the space industry by far. By far, we've had NASA people leave jobs of a lifetime to go there for their retirement because literally they're paying so much. But that does not solve the problem of engine hardware problems, which we believe they're having. And as far as New Glenn goes, we don't think that factory floor is full of New Glens being ready to be prepared, being built. They've got a Pathfinder. They've got Pathfinder engines which don't fire. They have very little else, so we don't know where they are on the schedule and how that will affect human landing system. At least with the B7 engine apparently doing quite well, we don't know. So yeah, I mean, very careful. I'm ducking and diving around that one a bit, but yeah, all is not as it seems, shall we say, with Blue Origin.
Yeah, and it's a good thing you brought up the BE4, because that was the other question that people are asking about. Because not only is BE4 the engine for their New Glenn rocket, which is likely a few years down the road, a brand new rocket, very big rocket. So understandably, there'll be some slight delays there. Coming up in the next couple of years, they want to debut that. But it's also the main engine for ULA's Vulcan rocket. And Vulcan is an integral part of launching these landing systems. Both the Dynetics and the national team landers require Vulcan to get off the ground versus Starship, which will launch on its own super heavy booster. So if BE4 does have delays, not only could that affect Vulcan's overall, but it will have a huge effect on the Artemis program. It won't affect the landers themselves, but if you can't launch the landers, they're not very much useful. So is that something to keep an eye on as far as keeping that 2024 landing or whatever timeline NASA really wants to pursue? Could BE4 really be a player there, or do we not really know that much about how significant this might be?
We've heard talk. Let's put it that way. We've had a lot of talk, and the old saying, "There's no smoke without fire." There's a lot of smoke. It really is a lot. So I would be very careful to say definitively where they stand. And if you acted Tori Bruner right now and said, "How's Vulcan looking for a debut launch?" It'd say everything's looking great.
Right.
Come back to it in about 6 or 7 months' time and see where to stand then. Because I think it's not just, I mean, BE4 is central to everything. But I think they need to do a lot of make a lot of progress over the next several months to see where we stand with the schedule for both New Glenn and Vulcan launches. So yeah, I would keep a very close eye on that, shall we say?
Let's take a more fun approach to this question, and I've got it up on screen. Completely hypothetical Lego rocketry question. Replace BE4 with Raptor. Would the Vulcan still work? Get rid of the 2 BE4s and put in 2 Raptors. What do you think?
No, you need a different tank ratio, right? Because
Yeah.
a different engine
Oh,
will use
that's
a
true.
different ratio of oxidizer to fuel, right? So it's not a matter of dropping those in. I mean, obviously they're using the same fuel, but but I am not a rocket scientist.
No, I think you're right. It's obviously I think more fun question, but realistically, that is actually probably the biggest hurdle would be, the tanks would have to be completely different sizes. So there you go. No, you cannot just replace BE4 with Raptor, as cool as that might sound.
And I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe it just so happens that the BE4 and the Raptor use the same ratio, but I doubt it.
I don't
Can you
think they
imagine
do.
Jeff? Can you imagine Jeff and Tori phone up Elon saying, "Can we just? We're thinking of going to change into Raptor now. So can we buy some engines off you?"
To be
How
able to
embarrassing
listen
would
in
that
on
phone
that
call be?
phone call, that would
My
be
God,
something.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
Here's a cool question. Jade wants to know, what do you think the next big project NASA will undertake after SLS? So maybe let's modify that to after Artemis, because SLS is part of that, but we think the broader goal is Artemis program, get permanent presence in and around the moon. What do you think might be after that, and what would that look like?
That's a good
Chris?
question. That's a very good question, isn't it? I mean, I think we've seen the end of the days where NASA designs launch vehicles and builds them. I think we're at the end of those days now. SLS will be the last vehicle the Marshall Space Flight Center will build, design and build, which was via instructions from the Senate, via the Authorization Act 2010. I remember it distinctly. That pretty much designed the requirements of the vehicle they were going to design and build. So that's where I think we're at the end of this now. The reason we're at the end of this now is because of the success with the commercial contracts that NASA's now oversighting and basically allowing the NASA's budget money to be spent on commercial vehicles, on commercial companies to go and cooperate with them and build their own vehicles that they can then contract and fly with. I think that's NASA's footprint now. And as far as its next big project goes, I mean, I think it will all based on that now. I think NASA will just change as an agency into oversight of spending government money on projects that commercial companies then go and build and fly. I think that's where we are now. I think it's worked so well. I mean, Jack, you talk about what you think.
Double Hubble. Hear me out. Okay. Okay. Hear me out. Double Hubble, you guys. 1 Hubble, 2 Hubbles, put them next to each other. Bam. Double Hubble. Make some like stereoscopic stuff. Maybe do like some 3D. 3D was all the rage a couple years back, right? I mean, why can't we? No, I mean,
Double Hubble.
Does Europa Clipper count? On a more serious note, would something like Europa Clipper count as post Artemis, or is that kind of concurrent?
No,
or
still,
I mean, I see a lot of people in chat saying Venus. I mean, heck yeah, let's full steam Venus. Let's go to Venus. I mean, I was I'll try and keep this short. I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and I love Mars and I want to go to Mars, but it's kind of ironic that we're going to Mars, a place where we want to add greenhouse effect to terraform it, when it would also be useful to go to Venus and study a place with runaway greenhouse effect, and to help us deal with our own problems here on Earth. But yeah, it would be really cool to have some Venus missions, especially to send some humans there. But I don't know. I don't know, because the phrase "what do we think" implies like what do we think is plausible, or like what's an actual potential thing versus like what do I want. So that's a good question. It's a tricky question. I don't know really quite what the answer to that would be. Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah, so Europa Clipper is kind of more of a concurrent thing, I think. When I heard the question, I'm thinking, okay, once you establish permanent human presence on Mars, the biggest like human space flight project would probably be extending that to Mars, I would think. I mean, Yeah,
But you
Venus
said
is
Mars twice.
now. I'm sorry. After a permanent presence on the moon, the next step would be extending that to Mars. I think I misspoke. Um, as much as this Venus announcement, which came out this week, is also super interesting and important, it's not a human spaceflight
No.
project. That's going to be a robotic project, not least of which because, you know, as unlikely as this event is to truly be, discovery of aliens, it's very interesting and we should totally check it out. We're ways away from thinking it's that. But if it is, the last thing you want to do is bring humans because if that's some microorganism that humans have never been exposed to, that's incredibly dangerous. So this is, and not to mention how hard it is to keep humans alive in and around Venus. So this is a robotic program. As far as human spaceflight goes, you got to think the next thing is Mars. It's hard to predict when what that will look like from a NASA perspective. I mean, if Starship's online, is NASA buying Starship flights to Mars and just doing it that way? Are there other vehicles that what other vehicles could supplement a Mars exploration, a human spaceflight Mars exploration effort alongside Starship? I can't even like you have New Glenn, you have Vulcan. Are those in the context of Starship being online, is it worth even going to those, or do you need like the new Armstrong notional Blue Origin
Mm.
competitor to Starship to even be worth mentioning? Chris, what do you think?
You know what? I think the answer to the question is something we don't know the answer to yet. But I think what will happen is once anything close to what Elon's envisioned for Mars with the Mars Base Alpha, anything like that, anything close to a base on Mars will facilitate the viability of investors spending a ton of money on building their own lines, their own Starship lines of rockets or supply rockets or whatever to a Mars colony. I think that's what kicks it all off. It needs
Mhm.
that viability of a demand, and then supply will come. So, I mean, that's what I think will happen. I think we're yet to see what will happen with the new ones, another Elon Musk, another SpaceX, another Jeff Bezos, someone rich with a lot of money who sees potential of the of deep space exploration and habitat would want to get in on this, and then we might see some brand new rockets we've not seen before, some even more impressive rockets, maybe even. This is the thing that will drive us forward. We're not going to get warp drive in our lifetime, but we're going to get some advances where maybe they'll think deeper into the solar system. So the Saturn moons and the Jupiter moons, whatever. I think it's exciting what it facilitates. It just needs someone to show that it's something they can afford and something that's viable economically. So I think that's what Elon is driving at, making something affordable within reason and something that can be profitable, maybe even.
Just a quick question in the same vein, like a question for people smarter than me, i.e. you two. What is the transfer window for Venus like? Like, is it similar in time and effort to Mars? Is it easier to get to Venus? Is it harder? Does it take longer? Does it take shorter? What is that like? Do we know?
I'm looking it up because
Well, Thomas is looking up. I will mention it's quite a fun fact about Venus is a lot of the missions to Mars and the planets do use Venus as a flyby. It's the first point in the past,
Yeah.
to do an Earth orbit and do a Venus orbit for the slingshot, and then do that as a fly pass. So you think it won't be too hard. Maybe if the transfer, flyby is easy. So maybe we could drop off a probe while they're doing a flyby. You never know.
Okay, so it looks like there are more frequent Venus transfer windows than Mars transfer windows. I'm looking at all right, I'll pull it up right here. This is a website called the Cosmic Train Schedule. Very useful. It basically
Awesome.
calculates a bunch of transfer windows for different orbits. Oh, and it's like not cropped properly. I can do some
Still cool.
magic here really quick.
Oh, there we go.
This is so we are in 2020 here. So we've got a window in 2021, another one in 2022, two in 2023, 24, 25. So they're more frequent
That's
than like
better than Mars.
Yeah, it's a little bit better than Mars transfer windows. So it's a little different, but basically it's as far as transfer windows go, it's still a similar thing where you can't just launch any time of the year. But yeah, it's different, but not as bad as Mars, to answer your question. All right, we're coming up on the end of the show. I want to really quick preview some launches coming up. We did have this Starlink scrub the other day, a Falcon 9 from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. That mission is on hold. I'm going to bring up the Elon Musk tweet. There's been some severe weather in the recovery area, and they were having some problem with the drone ship actually being able to hold station due to those strong currents. So we're waiting to hear when that next attempt to be. That's to be determined. It could be within the next week or so, so stay tuned for that. We also had a question about the Ula Delta Heavy. That is now coming up on the 26th, which is a week from today. And it'll be really early morning on the 26th. They had to replace some regulators on the ground out of an abundance of caution, and that has all been done and retested. So they are moving towards a launch next week, next Saturday. So hopefully that means that yes, they are going to get this Delta IV Heavy mission off the ground before the end of the month, and that will clear the way for an Atlas V launch, also for the NRO, hopefully shortly after that. So those are the upcoming launches from the Cape. We are also staying tuned for more Boca Chica testing with Starship SN7.1 and of course the SN8 hop test. So stay tuned for live coverage of all of that coming up here, right
Oh,
here on
really
NASA
quick.
Spaceflight. Yep, go ahead, Jack.
You mind if I plug my GoFundMe
Yep,
real quick?
go for it.
So earlier this like a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, somebody stole the catalytic converters off my Land Rover. Kind of made it inoperable, and it already needed a little bit of work that I've been saving for and putting off. But the catalytic converters being stolen and the work that it already needed kind of was like a double whammy. And I almost sold it for parts and got rid of it. So if you can support, I did a GoFundMe. I don't like asking for help. In fact, I hate it. But it just felt like I was juggling a bunch of balls, and life just kept throwing more and more balls into what I was juggling. And my computer broke, and that's what I used to do the daily update videos. And I'm still working on it. I'm talking to you through it right now, but the fan is blasting and it's barely workable. So that's my sob story. I'll stop. There's a lot of people that have much bigger problems than me. Oh no, my battery's dying. But yeah, so if you can, please help. I really appreciate it. There's my GoFundMe. That's all I'll say about that. Thank you everybody so much who's helped out already. I'm gonna start crying if I think about it too hard, so I won't. But seriously, thank you for the support. It feels like I have like a breath of fresh air in a smoke-filled room. Thank you. It means the world to me. All your support of this channel, all of our members of this channel, you guys are all helping out a huge amount. But you know, sometimes life throws you a curveball. And so I threw that up there. Thank you, everybody. That's all I'll say.
It's a very good community, and you can all help out that way.
Jack is the editor behind a vast majority of these daily
Yep.
Boca Chica videos that you get. So, you know, we really appreciate if you guys could help him out. He's an integral part of the team, and he brings a whole lot of coverage, not just Boca Chica editing, but photos, especially when things go out from like Mojave and Vandenberg, which, by the way, media cred for the next Vandenberg launch, SpaceX Falcon 9 with Sentinel-6 is out. I know Jack's going to be looking forward to that, as well as all the other NASA Spaceflight folks over on the West Coast. Michael Baylor's out there. Jada Shelter's out there. So I know they're all thrilled about that. No one tell Jack about Polar Launch Corridor. But huge shout out to Jack, and thank you for joining us today for the show. And then, of course, Chris Bergin, managing editor for NASA Spaceflight, the man behind the website itself and writing articles all the time, editing articles. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And my name is Thomas Burghardt, also an editor and writer for NASA Spaceflight. You can follow all of us on social media at the Twitter handles below. And we also want to give a big thank you to Michael Baylor, who's working behind the scenes, producing, managing the overlay and the graphics that you see. So a big shout out to him. And of course, a big thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch today, especially those who are sending in super chats, memberships, all of that support. We really appreciate it, and allows us to improve our coverage even more. Special thank you to these launch directors and flight engineers on screen. These are the highest tier memberships that you can get, and they're just throwing all sorts of support our way to help make our coverage even better. So thank you so much to everyone there. And until next time, this is the NASA Spaceflight team. Thank you for watching this week's episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. We will see you guys next time. Stay tuned for more spaceflight coverage.
pressure looks good.
Following up.